Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Whoa. Yeah? Like too loud? Okay, so, yeah, thanks, Anna. My background is in kind of a mixture of typography and typeface design, so I teach classes in typeface design, typography and graphic design at Kent State. And I got into typeface design as a kind of like mental health break from graphic design because it was the thing that I really enjoyed doing, just making letter forms and making systems of shapes. So today I'm going to talk to you about a research project that I started this year. I have my MA in typeface design from Reading and I'm starting an MFA in textile design this year. So the research project started with me learning how to weave, and I'm going to share some reflections today on the kinds of thoughts that enter in my head. So I'm sort of sidestepping outside of typography a little bit to reflect on typography. So underpinning all of the research that I've done, and I'm not going to show you too much of the weaving, I'm going to talk more about just the concepts involved, but underpinning this research was a lot of my reading the work of Anni Albers, who, if you're not familiar with her work, she was a weaver at the Bauhaus, where she was funneled into weaving because she was female. So she kind of found herself in that area and then decided to make the best out of it. And she almost single-handedly championed weaving as not just a domestic craft, but an art form in the 21st century. And she wrote about weaving in a really interesting way. She wrote on a typewriter, connecting the pages together as though they were a woven structure, so that, as Nicholas Weaver says, she could look at the parallel rhythms of both writing and weaving. And she did this in order to take up the fundamentals of textiles in order to translate them for those whose work in other fields encompasses textile problems. And I think that typography encompasses textile problems. So in order to start this process, I had to learn to weave. So I took my first class just to dip my toe in the water and see if I wanted to do an MFA in textiles. And I took a class called Pictorial Weaving, which takes its name from the book by Anni Albers, Pictorial Weaving, which was a focused study on the weavings of the Peruvian weavings, which use symbolism and the creation of geometric patterns to create communicative weavings as well as useful weavings. And so the one on the right there is my first attempt at drawing on a loom. And I decided that I wanted to look at the kind of underpinning structure of texture. So the origins of the word texture are from Latin texere, meaning to weave. So when we talk about typographic texture, we're really talking about how typographic form is woven together. So I wanted to look at that invisible texture and make it visible in a tactile and textile form. So these are some close-ups of the weaving that I made, the final piece for that project, which take the negative spaces of letter forms and embed test prints of a typeface that I developed to weave. And the typeface is a kind of throwaway typeface that I made. I'll show it to you, but it's not supposed to be a finished typeface. It was just to give me some graphic material to work with. And the idea really is to look at that kind of invisible aspect, as I said. Sorry, just getting my notes up. The first computer programmer, Ada Lovelace, kind of summed up nicely the relationship between texture or the kind of invisible aspects of what we do when we come from a digital environment into a tactile environment, when she said that mathematical science shows what is, it is the language of the unseen relations between things, and she actually wove algebraic functions on the jacquard loom, so she already had the kind of interest that I have in translating digital things into tactile content. So this is a close-up of the weaving, and as you can see, I wove it with linen so it's transparent so that you can see the suspended nature of the forms, so that you're kind of making more clear, I suppose, that underpinning texture. So translating the invisible structures with one medium articulating the other. And this is the plan that I used for that weaving, which I'll show you in a second. And you can see here that it's taking all of the graphic language from the invisible aspects of not just web design but typography. So how we mark up or describe what we're going to do with text in a sketch, or is the bottom left here with the rows of type interweaving, the negative shapes of the letter forms, the indication of missing letter forms with like those little tofu guys, but also then the arrangement of a form with its two sidearms below it and things like glyphs. And then just the more key tools, things like that, and just the general rhythm of letter forms on a line, the top and bottom. And then I wove that, and this is what I wove it on a floor loom, and you can see very much a hands-on process with my laptop open on one side, with the Illustrator open, and then weaving on the right-hand side. And then you can see as much of the weaving as you see at any one time on the left there. And also the much more tactile quality of all of the elements in there. So I was really trying to explore what different yarns would do to kind of elaborate on the shapes that were being made. And this is Anni Albers at work on a very similar kind of loom. And one of the distinguishing things that I took from her writing was the distinction or the dual meaning of the word medium. And she was coming from speaking German into English because she moved from the Bauhaus to Black Mountain College. And in that movement from one language to another, really kind of elaborated on the two meanings that she saw in the word medium. So again, if I'm coming from a digital media to a tactile medium, then I want to know what those two things are. So she talks about how medium, the word, describes something that is grounded in material as well as a vehicle for communication. And so obviously as typographers, we're used to the idea that typography is a medium for communication, but maybe not so concerned these days in the digital context with the materiality of type, except for letterpress printing. She is described as having said that this was the sitting in front of the loom, kind of like meditative aspect of weaving, forced you to listen to the yes or no's of your material. So without that material, what are the yes and no's is really my question. This is the typeface, very prototypical set of letter forms that I made to use in the weaving, which is derived from the typewriter, and because of Anni Albers' process of writing about weaving, and also obviously the Bauhausian minimalism, reductivism. This is an ongoing process, and I'm going to ditch that and do some more stuff after, but I need something to work with. So this is the final product, which is full of mistakes, which is a kind of part of the process of making something tactile and immediate and embedded in the material. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but the process of doing that opened up a lot of doors and ways of thinking about typography that I want to explore further, and that's really what the focus of this talk is. Translation and then kind of like moving from one thing to the other is really what the questions I'm trying to ask and answer are. So in the last talk that I gave at TypeCon, I asked what I would do next with the typeface, but really what I'm more interested in, I think, in even the space of time that it's taken since like August, the start of August to now, is what are the yes and no's of our materials in a digital context? How do we define craft in a digital context? And what is our material? So that led me to a few different avenues of research. So the idea of systematic creativity, so what it means to make in a way that is systematic and what the value of making something in a systematic way is for a person, just a crafter, a maker, what craft can do for an art form, and whether art has any role to play in design. So a project that influenced my thinking on this is the open source embroidery project, which was developed in response to the need for a material investigation of the digital and quickly found its form through both conceptual and folk culture. And that's a quote from Elle Carpenter, the leader of that project. And these are just some screenshots of a video where she presented some of the outcomes of that project, which was intended, as the name suggests, to kind of combine the open source nature of the digital era with much more tactile examples of open source through history. So quilting is a very good example of this. So this one on the left-hand side that she's pointing at is an embroidered quilt that is translating hex codes of colour into material form. So that collaborative nature of digital collaboration is now being made tactile. And then on the right-hand side, there is a kind of heat map of behaviours or movements through a space that is then translated into tactile form in a way that you couldn't look at the overlap in digital form. And then that led me to artists who think about language. And so Cecilia Pacuna is a weaver who looks at language and kind of explodes the idea of weaving. And she says that, as we quote, the poem is not speech, not in the earth, not on paper, but in the crossing and union of the three in the place that is not. So super abstract, heavy stuff there, I guess. But her main focus, or one of her main focuses in her work, is the kipu, which is a recording device, which uses yarn to annotate and record. And she explodes this into her own version of kipu. So this is a piece from 2014 called Kipu Rojo, and you can see that it's almost like an expanded weaving, like the structure is so loose that there's nothing really crossing. So the red parts are the kipu, and the images that cross them almost behave like a timeline or some kind of a visual structure like in a page layout. And so there are parallels there between the way we read this and the way we read writing. So all of this kind of comes back to that idea, or this led me to think about what it means to put yourself into something, and why we would make a typeface in the first place. So it's really the I of all of this. And Sadie Plant, when she's writing about weaving, says, a piece of work so absorbing as a cloth is saturated with the thoughts of the people who produced it, each of whom can flash straight back to whatever they were thinking as they worked. And I think as a person who makes letters and makes anything typographic, that same sense of immersion is present in anything that you do, and it's almost independent of the outcome. It's a kind of meditative process, like I said, you got into type as a meditative mind break. And then the other thing that I found interesting about this process was the impact of the materiality on the way I considered my actions and my mistakes. So if this is the back of the weaving, and you can see the trace of my hand as it moves across the weaving structure. So the warp threads are static. That's the ones that go vertically, and then the horizontal threads are really where the meaning lies. So that's the decision making on the go that happens at the loom. And then comparing that to typographic structures, that same kind of horizontal linearity being the meaning-making part of the reading experience is at play there too. So our vertical grid is common to both structures. And similarly here, this is a piece or a page from example from Designing Books by Yosakali, and then on the right-hand side, a piece called Ancient Writing by Anni Albers, and you can see the parallels there in the just composition, the movement of the eye across the piece, the ground in weaving, that sort of speak to that nature of both of these as a kind of writing. And so then it makes you think, well, what then is craft in a digital context? So if we think about craft as an embodied record of materiality, of a structure or system, of a conversation with materials, the spontaneity that happens at the loom and the mistakes that are embedded in a piece of work, whether it's a piece of furniture or weaving, and the discipline that's involved in making something, then how do we translate that into a digital context where you can't see those leftovers quite so clearly? And the other part of that, finding the I in all of the work, is the something that Anni Albers called the ineffability of this process. So she really thought of weaving as a way to translate the inner landscape of a person into an exterior manifestation. So that was something that I also wanted to investigate. So this is really taking typography and type design away from being a communicative endeavor to being an expressive endeavor. So then I looked a little bit more deeply into artists and weavers who use, and designers who look at language from that textural context or that textural perspective. So this is a page from Weaving Language by Francesca Capone, a weaver who looks at the relationship between the meaning of the line or the piece of yarn going back and forth and the meaning of a line of type. So she has color-coded the lines of the poem on the right-hand side to connect with the color in the weaving, so that the weaving is kind of an expression once removed from the language itself, but can be read in its own right. This is one of Anni Albers' prints from later in her career, where she went back to the two-dimensional, but at this point is so embedded in the idea of Paul Klee's taking a line for a walk, and the meaningful value of a line or a piece of yarn, that obviously it's stayed in her work even in the two-dimensional. And then typographers like Irma Bohm tackling the weaving context in a book about Sheila Hicks called Weaving as Metaphor, where her typographic treatment reflects the changing texture of the weaving structures that Sheila Hicks makes. And obviously with a name like Weaving as Metaphor, you can see that Hicks is also concerned with language and communication in woven form. And this is a quote from that book about the weaving at the bottom there, by Sheila Hicks. Mexican orange weaving on frame of rusty nails, picking, poking at the threads, yarns with a crude stick, as if writing in uneven measure, forming the words with large and small alphabet, tediously following a path dictated by vertical lines, over and under, across, beneath, eating every phrase of 2 or 3 inches with a X-acto comb. So the idea being that she's literally seeing weaving as writing. And then this kind of confirmed, this is not my work and not anything to do with my research project, but it really validated everything that I've just said today. This is one of my students' processes. So they're working on an experimental typographic poster at the moment, and they are challenged to communicate something through typographic form that might be kind of complex and difficult to understand. So student Nick Labate took the book. This is just a process work, this is obviously not the finished piece, but he took the book Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been by Joyce Carol Oates, which has embedded in it themes of dual identities, reality versus fantasy, childhood versus adulthood, inner and outer worlds, and decided to make a woven poster that the audience can come up to and interact with and pull apart the interwoven questions in order to investigate the concepts. So that really kind of made me happy when you said these things. So just to end, this is a quote from Ewan Clayton's book, The Golden Thread, which is a history of writing, and he says, "To those of us who spin the golden thread of written communication, I commend each tiny fibre that twists, knots, and entangles itself into the thread as time goes by. Celebrate their intersections, their parallel paths, and their differences, and may the spinning never cease." So there's obviously a connection between typographic form and woven texture. And I guess the questions that I would like to leave you with today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the break later, are what is our material? What is craft in a digital era? What is the value of practice for its own sake, for a profession that concerns itself with communication?